My name is KingSticks. In this video, we're going to be going over 5 essential ganking tips to maximize your jungle pressure. By recognizing a good gank, a bad gank, and the best way to go about ganking in general. This information is most useful for junglers, roaming mid laners, and roaming supports. As a whole though, it should apply a little bit to every role assuming you're leaving your lane. These 4 essential ganking tips are things I've developed and refined over my years of playing as a jungler and climbing up into challenger, so I really do hope these help you out. The first essential ganking tip is the Oracle lens. If you are not playing an invisible jungler who can easily go over walls or do lane ganks, things like Shaco, Twitch, Evelyn, then you really need to be getting an Oracle lens on your first or second back as a jungler. That way, whenever you go to make ganks happen, you can pop it as you're running through the bushes, because that's usually where the wards are. And if you run into a ward, you can break it and leave, or wait and hope the enemy steps up. The issue is, if you do not get this on your first or second back as a jungler, whenever you go in for a gank, the enemy can bait you into staying there for a long period of time by not necessarily going in, but not necessarily going out. More important than the gank not happening is definitely you not wasting your time, because without the Oracle lens on your first or second back, on a lot of these early ganks, you will be running into wards, you'll be standing around, wasting time, and potentially getting you or your teammates killed off of a counter gank since the enemies know you're there. Since most junglers don't have a long range dash, or they don't have invisibility to get around normal wards altogether, it is important that you get an Oracle lens no later than level 5, especially when you're level 6 and you have your ultimate up, you're ready to make a fat play. There's nothing worse than running through a ward or running past a ward and having your level 6 gank wasted. As a jungler, you'll usually hit level 6 before the bot lane does, so not being able to make good use of your ultimate is a really big kick in the face. The last thing I want to mention on this topic is there are a few junglers outside of invisible junglers that it's fine for them to hold on to their warding totem. Those are junglers who are reliant on wards for their mobility. Things like Jack's jungle, it's really nice for him to have the warding totem, that way he can jump away or potentially do a chase down. Lee Sin as well is relatively reliant on the warding totem for his mobility. In the past, with junglers like Lee Sin and Jax, they could still get the Oracle lens, but now with how difficult it is to have wards at all, it's only really possible if you have the support item, which junglers aren't allowed to build, or if you have the warding totem itself. So it really limits junglers like Lee Sin and Jax to forcing them to stay with their warding totem. The second essential ganking tip to maximize your ganking pressure or jungle pressure is summoner spells. If the enemy has used a flash, standard 5-minute cooldown, you can hover over, and if they took that one rune in the inspiration tree to lower their summoner spell cooldown, it will show up under the tab if you hover over it what the true cooldown is. But in general, 99% of the time, someone's flash cooldown is going to be 5 minutes long. So whenever you see the enemy use a flash, just type in the chat mid flash 9:30 or whatever it is. Make sure you turn on chat timestamps under the interface options. It's really useful for doing this. It makes it a lot easier to keep count of when the flash is up. You can in general use this to make very large windows for you to gank that lane. Let's say the enemy top lane used their flash at the 9-minute mark. That gives you a 5-minute window to gank them and most likely get a kill as long as the gank is reasonable. In lower elo, if you don't see the enemy use their flash, you don't know for sure, so asking your teammate can help. But once again, in lower elo, people don't necessarily have the best communication, so if you see your teammate died and your teammate used flash and everything, there's a decent chance the enemy did. Don't use that as a rule of law, just use that as a general thought process to help weigh things in your mind to make a better decision. A lot of you are probably thinking, based off of that logic, then why wouldn't you just keep track of every summoner spell? A lot of summoner spells have different timings. It can become mentally straining and clog up your chat to try to keep track of all the timestamps. The best thing for you to keep track of is just the enemy flashes. By far the single most important thing for living from a gank is having your flash up, and if the enemy knows it's down, they can force a lot more plays on you. This is more prevalent than ever due to Riot buffing the turret damage this preseason 9 by a large amount. So the more turret shots you're taking, you have a much higher likelihood of dying than you did before in season 8 or in earlier seasons due to the turret's overall increased damage. The third essential tip for ganking is minion wave. Where is the minion wave at when you're ganking? Are your teammates under their turret with a large minion wave whenever you're trying to gank? If that's the case, whenever you go in for the gank, your teammates won't be able to easily follow you up, because if they do, they're putting themselves at a guarantee of losing the minion wave. Not only that, if your teammates are under their turret, they're most likely at lower health than the enemy since they're being forced and poked under their turret. The exception to this rule is if you're trying to gank while the enemies are diving your teammates, since that way your turret will also be helping but in the case of your teammates are under the turret and the enemies are backing off, you want to try to avoid ganking that for the time being, unless you're able to solo both enemy champions by yourself. Something to also keep in mind is if you're ganking in a way to where even if your teammates can follow up, if the minion wave is large enough, especially if it's earlier in the game, those minions that seem weak like sticks create a mighty faggot, and whenever you try to take them on, those minions could easily be doing more damage than a champion. 5 caster minions, that's a little over 1 champion auto every time those things go off. A lot of times they'll be going in on a fat minion wave and you're like, how did we lose that? Look at the minion damage. Those things did more damage than the champions did. Minions normally aggro other minions or turrets before they'll hit champions. However, if the enemies are near their minions and you start hitting them, the minions will start to aggro you and it will hurt. The 4th essential ganking tip is arguably the most important one, is stop wasting your gap closer. I know it can be tempting, especially since most gap closers have built-in damage into them. So let's say you're playing Tristana, or you're playing Kha'Zix, or you're playing Gragas, or you're playing Sejuani. In a proper gank, you're supposed to be coming behind the enemies anyway, because if you're running at them from the front, they'll see you and just simply run away. So assuming you're coming behind the enemies, you want to simply just run up to them and start hitting them with your autos and normal abilities. Wait till after they move some distance away from you, either with their dash or with their flash, or simply just by walking away from you for a long period of time. After they've built up a distance away from you to where you can't hit them with your normal abilities or autos, that's when you'll be using your gap closer. That way you'll still be hitting them with the damage, but you'll be closing the distance. That way they can never actually get away from you. The exception to this rule is if you're playing a champion that has a very low dash cooldown that you can use several times in a given gank or pincer maneuver. A great example of a champion that has multiple dashes that should probably be used before the enemies necessarily start to run is someone like Kassadin. His ultimate's on a very low cooldown, especially once he has 2 or 3 points in it, to where using it to get to the enemy can be a very effective tool, since if they start to run or flash away from you, you can simply stay on top of them anyways. The 5th essential ganking tip applies to every single lane, and you can use it for more than just knowing when to gank. You can also use it for many more things, such as knowing when you are most likely going to be ganked, and also when you should rotate to specific locations, and many more things that we're not going to get into this video for time's sake. And that tip is using your F keys or clicking on your mini map for a more specific look at what's happening. A lot of you are probably saying, but why can't I just look at my mini map? I'm already used to it and I can still get a lot of information that way. Looking at your mini map is more of a tool to figure out if everybody is where they're supposed to be. So if you glance at the mini map, you see the enemy top laner's top, the enemy bot laner is bot, but the enemy mid laner is missing, so that can put you on edge and make you play safer. The minimap's only real function is to show you positioning of your teammates, the enemies, and minion waves. Other than that, you miss out on a lot of information. What kind of information, you might be asking? By looking at the minimap, you cannot see the enemy's health. You cannot see the health of the minions, which will predict which wave will outpush the other wave, so you can figure out who's going to be under whose turret, and you cannot necessarily see how many minions are in each wave. Before you go to gank a specific lane, ahead of time and during and slightly before, you should have an exact snapshot of what the minions' health are, of what the enemy's health is, and what your teammates' health is. The F keys are an amazing way to do it. Very fast, very quick. It definitely does take some time to get used to, since the F keys are at the top of your keyboard. You can reprogram them to be any key you want. Just go under the settings in League of Legends. It shouldn't be too hard to find. The default setting for the F keys is F1 puts the camera directly over you, F2 puts it directly over your top laner, F3 puts it over your mid laner, and F4 puts it over your AD carry, and F5 puts it over your support. Generally, you don't really need to use the F1 or F5 key. The reason why you don't really need to use the F1 key is your spacebar is automatically set to hover over you. So unless you change that, you don't really need F1. And since the AD carry and support are almost always together, you don't really need the F5 key. You can just use the F4 to see the AD carry and the support, usually always at the same time. So you want to get your fingers just comfortable on F2, F3, and F4 key. That is only 3 keys to give yourself precise information information about the enemy's health, minion health, and your teammate's health at the same exact time. Like I said, it does have a bit of a learning curve in muscle memory curve. I would definitely just start out slow. No matter what role you're playing, try to use at least one F key at least once every 10 seconds. This should help to get your muscle memory down. As a jungler, you want to try to use it more often. As a jungler, if you're looking to gank lane, you want to try to use the F key at least once every 5 seconds while either doing a camp or while walking between camps or walking from gank to gank. I have heaps and heaps of F key tips that I'll probably make a separate video on for time management's sake and for specificity's sake, so definitely watch out for that. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help me out a lot. My name is Kingsfix. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Hey everyone, and welcome. In this video, we're going to be covering the jungle route you need to know for Season 9. This guide is aimed not only to help junglers, but also laners, as it's an extremely aggressive gank-heavy route in the early game. We'll be breaking down not only how to execute this route, but also how to counter it later on in the video, so make sure to watch it to the very end. Alright, let's get started with a quick overview. We begin this path by getting a leash on our red. Afterwards, we gank the nearby side lane. Yes, we're ganking that early and it's only going to get more aggressive from here. Next, we take the nearby scuttle in the river. Once we've done this, we execute a transition gank through mid lane. Surely, this must be the end of the onslaught of our aggression. Nope. We then take the next scuttle in the river. After this, we have several options, the first being invading to steal the enemy's red and killing them. Second is to gank the other side lane if they're overextended. And lastly, we can go back to full clearing our jungle with our double scuttle advantage. Many of you are probably thinking that this seems borderline overpowered, and it absolutely is. This is arguably the strongest route in Season 9. However, not every jungler can do this route. You want to use it on champions with a strong level 2 in terms of ganking and dueling. The main examples of this are Camille, Xin Zhao, and Pantheon. All three of these champions offer early game crowd control while being strong duelers that can win 1v1 against the enemy jungler. Even though this path is really strong, it's not unbeatable, so let's break down exactly how to use this route as well as how to counter it. You want to start the game getting your early line of vision in the pixel brushes. This is absolutely imperative in the current meta. Ward the side you're starting on at 110 and get your teammates to ward the opposite side at 120. These wards will help scout what path the enemy jungler is taking and whether he's going to take an early scuttle of his own. I'll explain shortly what to do if he does. So we always begin by taking our red instead of our blue. Why is this? The red buff will not only make our auto attack slow, but also do damage over time. This will help our ganks hit harder as well as our dueling power at any early skirmishes over the scuttles. That being said, it's not only due to the different effects of the buffs. By starting at red, after we take both scuttles, we'll end in our blue side jungle. This is where our wolves and Gromp resides. These camps are much faster and easier to take than the raptors and krugs. So after doing red, we look for a gank on our nearby side lane. It's very important that you move through the tri-brush and not through the ramp near mid lane. This will help you avoid being spotted in the extremely common pixel brush wards we mentioned earlier. We then look to execute our gank on the side lane. For the most part, this is a free gank. Let me explain. The Rift Scuttle doesn't spawn until the 2-minute mark, meaning that if you went straight to the scuttle, you'd be standing around waiting for a bit. We can use that downtime to try and execute a gank on the side lane, while losing a very minimal amount of time in the process. After this, you move to take the nearby scuttle. It's very important to watch your opposite pixel brush ward during this moment. You're looking to see if the enemy jungler is also going for an early scuttle. In this example, we spot Kayn, so what should we do? The answer is, you need to enter into vertical jungling. Vertical jungling can be best visualized if we split the map in half with a line through mid lane. One jungler will get the top side of the map, while the other jungler will get the bot side. Both of you will end up farming each other's blue side jungle as if it was your own. This results in clearing vertically from top to bottom instead of the usual horizontal jungling from left to right. So if we jump back into the replay, we know to take the enemy's blue, Gromp, and wolves. It's important that when you clear wolves, you leave a small one up. This will delay the respawn of the camp significantly for the opponent. Some of you are probably wondering why we enter a vertical jungling scenario when we see the enemy jungler take the opposite scuttle early on. The reason is, the enemy jungler isn't able to defend their blue before you take it. For example, in this situation Xin Zhao takes the top scuttle while Udyr takes bot scuttle. Udyr runs to try and defend his blue, but by the time he gets there, Xin Zhao has already stolen it. On top of this, now Udyr isn't able to steal Xin Zhao's blue since he's so far away. So let's go back to when you first kill the scuttle. After this point, you're looking to execute a transition gank on mid lane. Our main goal is to get to the other scuttle as fast as possible. Moving through mid lane is simply the quickest path there. This is what makes it a transition gank. We're transitioning from one side of the map to the other. The gank is just a side effect of this process. One of the additional benefits is that it will often secure you priority in your mid lane. This will help you win a fight if the enemy tries to contest you at the scuttle. After taking the next scuttle, we can now decide whether we want to invade, gank the side lane, or go back to farming. In this replay, the enemy Lee Sin started blue, while the Camille started at red. This means that Lee Sin's red is still up. A lot of the time, when a jungler starts at blue, they will clear multiple camps such as Gromp and wolves before getting to their red. When you invade, you're hoping that the enemy made the mistake of doing this, allowing you to catch them at their red, often securing a kill and stealing the buff. Another reason why this works is that the pixel brush wards will expire at 2 minutes and 50 seconds, so by the time you finish the scuttle, they will lose their early vision. This lets you invade without being spotted. If the jungler didn't start on the same side of the map as you, then invading is no longer an option as their buff will already be taken. Instead, you want to look for a potential gank on the side lane. This one is relatively straightforward. If the enemy bot lane is pushed and equal in health to your bot lane, then execute the gank. If there's no gank available, you can simply fall back into full clearing your jungle. This is still advantageous as you've applied early pressure, and since you've secured both scuttles, you'll have a farm advantage on the enemy jungler. Alright, this route is starting to look bulletproof, so let's cover what you can do to counter it. Firstly, if you're the bot lane, do not try to cheese the enemy bot lane in the tri-brush. You'll only end up fighting 2v3 and instantly losing your lane. You want to start by getting an early line of vision. Ward both the pixel brush as well as the tri-brush near the enemy's red buff. This is how you counter it as a laner, as it will help you spot the enemy when he tries to execute early ganks on both the side lane and mid. That being said, some champions such as Camille could dash over the wall to avoid these wards. If this is the case, ward the center of the river instead of the pixel brush. Now, when you do red into scuttle into the other scuttle, you end up leaving your raptors and Krugs up. This is one of its main weaknesses. As a jungler, you can look to punish this. If you start red, you can take Krugs into raptors, clearing your entire red side. After which, you can counter jungle the enemy's raptors and Krugs, making sure to leave one small raptor to delay the camp's respawn. Since you've already taken your red side jungle, it offers no way for the enemy to invade and equalize. Alright, we went over a lot in this video, so let's recap. You start by taking your red into ganking a side lane. After this, you take the nearby scuttle. You watch the pixel brush ward on the opposite side of the map to scout if the enemy is going for the opposite scuttle. If they are, you want to initiate a vertical jungling scenario by invading their blue. If they aren't taking the scuttle, you transition gank mid into taking the scuttle for yourself. After this, you can invade their red if they started on the same side of the map as you. If not, you can look for a gank bot if it's available. Otherwise, return back to farming your jungle with your double scuttle advantage. The best way to counter this route is to get an early line of vision in the Tri-Brush and Pixel Brush on their red side. Additionally, junglers can look to clear their own red side jungle into stealing the enemy's Raptors and Krugs. Alright, what do you guys think of this jungle path? Let us know in the comment section below, as well as any questions you might